Hello and welcome. It's a good day to be on the farm. This is Edgewater, Episode 6. Edgewater Farms, Episode 6. Or maybe it's not Episode 6. I'm not really sure yet. This is me harvesting that wheat field that we were harvesting in Episode 5. I thought, I might as well record the footage as I'm doing it, even if I don't release it. But instead of making a regular episode where I just talk about what I'm doing on the farm, I thought maybe I would just ramble a little bit about some things that are on my mind and just some other topics as they come to me. So, no idea what I'm gonna say, no idea what I'm gonna talk about, but I've got at least a half an hour to 45 minutes of harvesting to do, and figured might as well give it a shot. So let me get this lined up. We should hit our 100% either on this run up or be very close to it. So we'll get this lined up one way or the other and get the pipe out in preparation. 94, 95. I am slightly regretting not turning on a straw swath, but I also don't have the equipment. I'm not really sure what I would do with all that if I had one. So anyway, let's see, 9,000. Can we get to the end? Oh, I goosed it right at the end when I shouldn't have, and we lost just a little bit of crop there. So I'm going to go ahead and power this down for a second and switch over here and bring our New Holland and our our tipper. I was talking about bales, and so it got confused. So again, we've got our 3 silos. We got flax in the middle, peas in the right. We'll put the wheat in the left-hand one. And the thing I like about these silos is if you walk up to them, it actually says what crop is in there. So I'm going to try my best to keep all the crops in the correct silo, but we will see what happens. No promises. I'll probably mess it up sometime sooner versus later, and we'll see what happens with that. But regardless, so here is kind of what I'm doing on this field so far. Let me get underneath the auger, and then I will pull up the map and show you. And this is not gonna go. Let me just turn that off. I guess I have to have this one turned on, which I knew, but yeah, there we go. So I'm dividing it into sections. So obviously I'm making a big rectangle over here. We'll clean up this section down here and 1 or 2 passes to get that cleaned up. And then we'll also square this one off, or maybe just do a horizontal here. So it's just 2 or 3 long runs and square those off. And then I might do a straw swath just on these square sections. I don't like doing a straw swath when it's wiggly and turny everywhere because it's really hard to pick up with a baler that way. But if you've got it squared off like this, you can get some really nice rows. And so then we could get a little bit of straw if we wanted to, but I'm not sure that we do. So we'll see how that goes here in a second. What do you mean I don't have access to this land? So, anyway, I don't know if I should clean these things up first or if I should come over here. I guess I'm already over here, so maybe it would make sense to go around our trailer and then do a little loop down here and widen that out. And then we can maybe square that off and do a run there. Maybe we don't even need to do the loop. I guess we probably will, just to clean off this section, because one would do pretty good with that. Alright, so I know I said I was going to ramble, and all I'm doing is talking about farming. So, fail. But I just kind of wanted to talk about something that I think is really unfair um, regarding interest rates and regarding some things that are happening in the economy and government spending and what that's doing to retirement. And I know that's a weird topic, but it's something that I think about. And I'm just not very happy with the way things are set up right now. So I don't know. I thought this might be a great place to talk about that, and just kind of put that out there because it's my channel. I can kind of say what I want, freedom of speech and all that. So number one, back when my parents, who are now in their 70s, were starting a family and buying a house. They both, at this point, have master's degrees. They didn't at the time, obviously, but they both went back and got master's degrees at some point in time in their educational career. They bought a house for about $30,000. They did buy it in the 80s, and interest rates were terrible then. But the high interest rates of the 80s helped curb some of the inflation that happened, and kind of really set us up for a big boom in the 90s and the 2000s, which we felt, and kind of this bull market that's been going on for a really long time. I know obviously 2022 was not a bull market. That's not what I'm trying to say. But that the high interest rates really kind of helped the economy cool off in a way that let people actually save money. So the goal, or the American dream, if you will, was to save up to about $1 million or $2 million in retirement savings, and then you could live off the interest, because if you had a nice, solid, base amount of money, you could get 5% guaranteed in a CD at a bank, a certificate of deposit. And you could use that CD to live off the interest. You get, let's just say $2 million, and you get your 5% guaranteed CD. You can recreate your income, from that money generated on that certificate of deposit, or bonds, which I don't know that much about bonds, so I'm gonna preface anything that I say about bonds from here on with, I'm not really a bond expert, but I understand the concept of what is government backed, or what is a bond for a corporation, and the guaranteed money that you're supposed to be able to get from those, and how they're more secure than stocks and things like that, but that you could get a nice guaranteed rate of return. And I've been to enough financial seminars and financial planning meetings and things like that to know that if you start in your 20s and you do put a consistent amount of money into a 401k or a Roth IRA, and you don't touch it for 40 years till you're in your 60s, 65, and ready to retire, or 67 and a half, or whatever it is now. I don't think my generation is probably going to be able to retire till you're 70, but we'll see what happens 20 years from now. I'm in my early 40s, so I think about this stuff, but I still got 25 or more years of my career ahead of me before I can think about retirement. So $1.5 million to $2 million is doable, depending on what you're putting into your retirement savings. In a dual income household, if myself and my wife were both working, which we are, and we've both got decent middle class jobs, we've both got college degrees, so we're making reasonable middle class money. We could save, technically, let's just conservatively say $1 million. That is foreseeable. But you don't really get to $1 million in either of those charts till those last 5 years. Like, we're certainly nowhere near that now. But you get like, you slowly creep up to like 50,000, and then a couple years later you might get close to 100,000, and then 10 more years and you're at like 200 to 300,000, and then it's like the last 5 years on that chart takes you from like 300 to 500 to 800 to a million to a million two, or whatever. I don't know. I don't have one in front of me. It's been a little while since I've looked at one, but I get the idea, right? Well, that made sense to me. Like when I was growing up, and taking my finance or my personal finance classes and learning everything about that, that's the American dream. You get your college degree, you get a wife, you have some kids, you buy a house, and then you start shoving into retirement, and hopefully you can get enough money that you can get a nice conservative investment at a bank and save that money and live off the interest. Like save the principal and live off the interest. So that's the plan that I was thinking about trying to do. Well, since the stock market has been in this bull market for, like 2011, let's say, up to 2021, 10, 11 years there, where it was just going up and up and up, interest rates just stayed so incredibly low. And then the government introduced quantitative easing and all of those government programs that were keeping interest rates down, which made it easy to buy a house or a car or borrow money or over leverage yourself, but made it really hard to get a decent conservative savings rate. And a lot of people who retired in the last 10 years, my parents included, have had to abandon the idea that they were going to get a decent guaranteed rate of return on a CD or on bonds or anything like that. The rates have just been historically low. So what does that do? It forces people to gamble their retirement on a higher return, because if they can't live off the interest, because the CDs aren't giving them 5%, the CDs are giving them 1 or 1.25%, which doesn't keep up with the 2% annual inflation. So you're like giving the bank a large sum of money to lose money over time for the guaranteed return. Well, that's not smart finance. But everything I've ever read about retirement savings is once you are actually ready to retire, you need to phase out of stocks and phase into bonds and guaranteed returns. Well, there's no guaranteed returns to be found that compete with inflation. And as we know, over 2022, we saw record inflation for us anyway, for the last 10 to 20 years. These, like, what was it? The CPI, I think, was at like 7.5%. Groceries was double that, over 14%. Electricity bills were also really, really high in that, 15 to 20% range. Like, I think everybody feels like their utilities went up a lot. Their electric bill specifically got really expensive over the last year and a half. I know our grocery bill went way up. Of course, I have teenagers, so the grocery bill is a little subjective because I have 3 kids and they're eating us out of house and home right now, as they should, as teenagers. I'm not necessarily blaming them for that. I understand. But, those things are increasing our cost of living. And I can tell you, we're not getting raises at a 14% level. Like, that's unsustainable for the market either. So, you stay in your job, you work hard, you get your 3% raise if you're lucky, and then groceries go up 14%. So I worked really hard, and I did everything I could to continue to earn income for my family, and I can afford less groceries now than I did a year ago with a raise, with a standard raise. Like, 3% is like an industry standard raise. Well, some of the years they didn't even give raises because, COVID. Oh, well, we lost a lot of money during COVID, or COVID cut our costs or whatever, and Okay, well, yeah, I get that. I mean, obviously, if you don't have the money, can't give you a raise, totally fine. But yeah, we're not keeping up with the cost of living. The cost of living is going up, and incomes are going down um, as we come out of this giant period of record spending by the government. Like the government spent a lot of money, um, and rightfully so, on a lot. You know, you got to do something when the economy shuts down because of quarantines and things. So I'm not necessarily blaming the government for that, but that money has to be paid back, and that money gets paid back by raising taxes and causing, the lower and the middle class to have even less money to spend on the things that they need to, um, like groceries and utilities and things. So I guess what I'm trying to say is my parents' generation, you get, $1 to $2 million saved up in your retirement, and then you throw that thing in a CD or in some guaranteed bonds or whatever, that's going to keep you from having to fight um, off losses from a stock market collapse, which would be devastating at that point in time in your finances. Um, and that made sense. But because the government is just spending money left and right, they're forcing the Fed to try to cool inflation and to tamper interest rates and to do all these things that they've been doing for years now with the quantitative easing and the steps that have been taken after that to try to combat this inflation. But it hasn't worked. And honestly, I think we're still at the beginning point of this. Um, I think that the inflation that we saw in 2022 was a result of not even the COVID stuff. It was a result of the overspending that Donald Trump did when he was in office. I don't want to get too political here because that's not the point of this. But I don't think we've started to really see the effects of the inflation that Biden has spent on his government programs. And I know a lot of that is COVID spending, and that's emergency spending and had to be done, and that's fine. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have spent that money. I'm just saying that people need to know that the inflation is not gone. The rough 2022 where everything went up is not the end, from what I can tell. I think it's just kind of the beginning. And that is scary to think about. Because what this does is how my parents could, or my parents' generation, the boomers, let's just say, how they could focus on, saving their $1 to $2 million at 5% on a CD. They could recreate enough of a money to live on with, what little they're getting from Social Security and their other benefits. But when interest rates are held low like they were for so long, and you're only getting 1% for a CD, and bond rates are low, and you can't find a good rate of return anywhere, now, like, to realistically keep up with things at that lower rate of return to get the same effect, which is replacing my income after I retire, I would need to save like $8 to $10 million because the rate of return is so much lower on the guaranteed investments. Okay, well, I mean, yeah, there's an economic reason for that, but the government spending is causing my generation to have to gamble our retirement because like, we can't. Like, the average person in the U.S. can't save $8 to $10 million no matter how many years they work. Like, you'd be 100 and you still wouldn't be there. And nobody can work to 100. Like, it's just not a reasonable expectation. So I just don't think it's fair the way the government is spending money and then not being honest about who's going to have to pay that back, because it's going to be the taxpayers, and we're going to pay the tax one way or the other. It may not be in an income tax, but they might reduce subsidies on natural gas or subsidies on oil that affects your ability to commute. And I know lots of people have work from home jobs now, so that's not necessarily an issue from them, at least for spending the gas on crude oil, or like spending the money on a combustion powered vehicle, using crude oil prices to establish what the gas price is. The gas price would be like $6 at the pump if there wasn't for all the government subsidies that are out there right now. And those government subsidies are causing us to not see how much things really cost. So that's not great. Um, so I don't know. Something that's been on my mind. It just doesn't seem like this is a viable plan going forward. And so I'm bringing these questions up. I don't have answers. I've got some conservative investments that I've done that I hope pay off, but I can tell you my track record of investing isn't great. I've taken a lot of flyers on things that haven't really panned out. But I do these things because I'm afraid of what is going to be left for my family after. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I want to cut into this next. I've got it cut down to the two big squares, and I'm 74% full. So I think I'm only going to get one strip. I didn't want to end in the middle, but I think I'll come down here and just get started on this end. And yeah, I still don't think I'm going to do the straw swath. I wanted to, but I just don't think we can afford a baler right now. So anyway, so I don't exactly know what to do. I just want awareness to be out there that like inflation is not done and inflation is not going away, and the cost of living will continue to rise, which it always has, and that's fine. But we're in a period right now where the cost of living is going up at a much higher rate than we're used to, and most of America is over leveraged, like has a lot of credit card debt, has a lot of auto debt, has a lot of student loan debt, or whatever it may be. And those things are all dangerous in a market where suddenly everything is more expensive. If you don't have enough money to put groceries on your table, are you really going to be able to pay your student loans? Are you really going to be able to pay your credit card bills? Or are you going to put that food that you can't afford on your credit card and pay an even higher price because you're paying interest as well that you, let's be honest, can't afford? And so I don't know. It's just, it's scary to me to see where we might be at and what the standard of living might be for my kids. So I've got 3 kids. I said some of them were teenagers. One of them passed driver's ed last year or last summer, and the other one's going to be taking driver's ed this summer. So we're looking at cars for them and looking at car insurance and looking at all these other things that factor into this too. And I just like, if interest rates continue to rise, which I honestly think they need to, because we need to pay down some of this government debt, our national deficit is appalling. We're going to default on all of our loans because we can't afford the interest payments as interest rates continue to rise. And all of these national debt is owned by other countries. And those checks might come due. Like if we start bouncing checks to China, that's going to be a problem geopolitically, which again, I'm not an expert. I don't know how to parse out all these things, but I just know that it's not going to be good if we can't pay the bills as a country. So I don't have the answers. I just want to raise awareness so people aren't overspending now while things are still quote unquote affordable, because I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I think there's going to be some resetting that happens. And I just think that like the middle class America, mom, dad, 2 kids, a couple of cars, and a house in the suburbs is a dream that's going away. Like it's not sustainable in our current market. I'm like my parents grew up saying, hey, you got to go to college. We expect you to go to college, get a job, and support yourself. And part of that, buying a house, having a family, all that kind of stuff, um, you know, was the expectation, or at least was kind of the norm. And so kind of what you just kind of fall into if you don't have a better plan, or you don't really, I mean, it made sense to me. It's what I did. But like, that's not an option for my kids right now. Like, the way real estate prices have went up, it has priced anybody under the age of 30 out of the market, just because they don't have the kind of down payment they would need to have saved up yet. So I just, like, my kids can't buy a house because there's just no way. I don't like that, you know. An apartment living is fine. Everybody's got to do it for a couple of years, but like, think of how long it would take to save up like an $80,000 down payment for a house in today's market with these gas prices and these grocery prices and utility prices and all that stuff. Like, it's not going to be an easy road for them. And so maybe just the expectation needs to be, well, no one buys houses anymore. But that's not fair. That's like just a straight up erosion of the middle class. You have to live in apartments. You have to have a landlord. The upper class owns the housing, and they charge the lower class an arm and a leg to use it. And that's not great. And that just welcomes more government subsidies for housing, which again is more government spending, which again causes this problem with the interest rates and inflation. And it's just kind of a cyclical thing that's not good for anybody. Especially not for the middle class. So there's something to think about. And I don't know, this is the kind of thing that really bothers me, and people just aren't talking about it. Yes, after 2022, people are talking about, oh man, groceries are really expensive. They are talking about inflation a little bit, but they're not talking about the kind of inflation that I'm talking about. They're talking about, things went up, but things will normalize. And the Fed says that a lot. Things are normalizing, rates are normalizing, whatever. Nothing is normalizing. Like, costs are continuing to rise, and wages are not rising accordingly. Now, wages have went up a lot in the last year too, but not 14%. And I just think we're in for another year or two of that at least. And if people don't figure out how to compensate for that in their budgets, they're going to have a really hard time. So, I don't know, food for thought. You guys tell me what you think. This is kind of an abnormal episode for me, but I just want to kind of open up a little bit, share what's on my mind as I'm plowing a field here, or harvesting a field, excuse me. So, I just thought this might be a good time. Since I'm going to be doing it anyway, might as well just record the footage and ramble a little bit and see if anyone is interested in listening to it. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there, because I think I'm about at a half an hour. And we've got this in a nice, neat square. So we did a good job getting the field kind of caught up to where we were. And from here, we could literally hire a worker to do the rest of this if we wanted to. I'm not sure that we do, but it's an option now because it's squared off. And it's manageable. We do have to run the trailer back here in a second, but we'll do that in the next episode. Anyway, I appreciate you guys listening to me. If you did make it this far in the video, you're my hero. And I'd like to know your thoughts. It doesn't have to be super controversial, but just, drop me a comment. I'd love to hear it. And if you like this sort of thing, let me know that too, so I can make more episodes like this. Otherwise, I just kind of cut this stuff out and record it in the background while I'm watching TV or something on Netflix or whatever. And then, cut back in when I've got something to say, which is a perfectly fine way to do it too. But I thought, hey, I am harvesting it, so I might as well record it, and might as well just put some thoughts out there. So anyway, I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And in the next episode, I will get back to just farming for a little bit till I get some feedback from you guys. But have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.